I have been playing way too much Battlefield recently. What happened was I got hit by a car. Well, not exactly hit. The idiot pulled a U-turn from the oncoming lane and I didn't have enough time to brake. What I needed was a video game that would remain interesting for at least a few weeks while my back healed. Single player games were out of the question because I would have to look for one that I liked, spend at most 50 hours on it, typically 20, and then have to look for another one. Counter-Strike was a possibility, except my current setup is not well suited to competitive gaming, and frankly, that shit is like crack to me. I am not going to undo the work it took to get off the thing. Battlefield 4 was the prime candidate. I had already sunk hundreds of hours into it in the past, and through its expansive maps, varied game modes, a smorgasbord of guns and equipment, and more playstyles than I could count, it was unlikely that I would get bored of the game. Unfortunately, due to the age of the game and the nature of third-party servers, not all maps or game modes are ubiquitous nowadays. The player base is pretty strong these days, and I was consistently able to find at least one almost full server in Europe, even right before sunrise. However, those servers are usually limited to Team Deathmatch, Rush, Conquest Large, and a couple oddball servers for people who haven't unlocked some of the rare equipment yet. Compounding on that, I never bought premium and I missed out on the promotional event by just one map set. Currently, it makes a ton of sense to just get the premium version, and as far as I can tell, the only version available on Steam is the premium one, which gets frequently discounted down to the single digits. Because of the existence of premium and the freebie DLCs, servers are usually split between all vanilla and all DLC plus vanilla. Therefore, most recent purchase of the game should be the premium version, so I have no idea what I'm missing out on. Never mind, they ran a sale literally last night. I have the premium version of Battlefield 4, Battlefield 1, and Battlefield V. I did not get the premium version for Battlefield 3 because of the UI scaling issues. It's pointless, really. This issue is called player base segmentation, and it was discussed extensively during the main life cycle of the game. People with premium play on servers with DLCs, people without play on vanilla map servers. To me, most of the DLC servers might as well not exist because I can't access them. A player who has access to the premium edition only usually plays on vanilla servers when DLC servers aren't populated. Extend that logic to the entire player base, and premium players rarely intersect with non-premium players on the same servers. Battlefield 4 has a campaign, which exists. I was intending on that being my entire commentary on the campaign as a joke, but due to its absence in the most recent installment in the series, and some notable pushback, I have to talk about it. I have played at least the demo version of Bad Company 2's campaign, as well as the BF3 and BF4 campaigns at least a couple times each. If I remember correctly, helicopters and jets are conspicuously absent from the aforementioned campaigns, and it takes about the length of one of these campaigns to learn how to fly any of those vehicles. The result is a campaign that lacks most of what differentiates Battlefield from its direct competitors. As with Call of Duty, the campaign takes place in modified versions of the game's multiplayer maps, so the environment is somewhat of an afterthought. Just like with Call of Duty, the main purpose of a campaign is to onboard new players and to act as marketing. It is difficult to market a multiplayer experience, whereas if you have a campaign, you can cut a trailer like it's an action movie trailer. Single player campaigns cost a lot of money to make. They require tons of additional mocap, voice acting, animated scenes, scripted events, bots that aren't even available on multiplayer, writers, directors, script supervisors, just lots of money for something that only a small part of the player base will experience. I think it's sad that people skip campaigns in multiplayer focused games. I always like to start my playthrough of a Battlefield or a Call of Duty by going through the campaign to get up to speed with the mechanics, the guns, etc. These games have massive budgets too, so the campaigns usually have good action, big set pieces, and occasionally serviceable storylines. The cost of a single player campaign, combined with their low participation rates, has led to them getting axed in a lot of recent installments of Call of Duty and Battlefield, but I think there's one more factor at play here. Storylines for the campaigns of modern military shooters have become a liability. Audiences have lost their appetite for contemporary semi-realistic wars between large powers, so creating a story for a campaign is risque to say the least. In the early 2010s, America was still at war in the Middle East, and the Middle East didn't have major backers behind it. In the early 2020s, Israel has responded to a terrorist attack by carpet bombing its own populace, attacking UN peacekeepers, and invading its northern neighbor, which is polarizing its western backers like never before, and China might invade Taiwan, which is backed by the US and is the linchpin behind the tech industry of every western nation. Russia invaded Ukraine 2.5 years ago. If not for the threat of nuclear weapons, there's a good chance I would have been conscripted to fight in that war because I'm a European and military military age. That is the issue that Battlefield is now facing. Its exact target audience is at severe risk of being enlisted to fight not some revenge war in a faraway land, but to defend their own homeland against enemy combatants. Some corny Clancy-esque storyline about terrorists and the deep state causing an oopsie conflict between superpowers just seems in bad taste given the current international political climate. Writers for modern military shooters are finding themselves one bad narrative decision away from a severe critical panning and a nation-level condemnation. Speaking of geopolitical tensions, Battlefield 4 reached Russia many years before the invasion of Crimea and all the subsequent economic sanctions. Not only are there still active Battlefield 4 servers in Russia that I can access from Western Europe, but there is a sizable portion of the currently active player base that is ethnically Russian, a subset of which resides in Russia, and a subset of that which supports the Russian side of the war in Ukraine. The game allows for pretty deep customization of player avatars in-game through the emblem system, so I have seen my fair share of ultra-nationalist pro-Russian emblems. It's an odd feeling to play pretend war in an online game against in-game enemies that represent my real-life enemies played by my real-life enemies. Even worse, a lot of the war zones in the game as well as all the equipment available for use closely match the setting and the equipment used in Ukraine. Zavod 311 is obviously based in a southwestern part of Soviet Russia. All the equipment is modern, yet slightly outdated, matching the equipment that both Ukrainian and Russian forces have access to in real life. There's also a surprising prevalence of drones, including some with explosives attached to them. While there do exist games that are much more realistic than Battlefield, I don't think this degree of realism in this specific setting exists in any other game. On top of that, one of the factions involved in Battlefield are the Russians. I'm honestly scared of processing my feelings about all this, my fear being that if I do process them, I will conclude that the game feels too close to home to be enjoyable. 11 years after its release, Battlefield 4 is still very enjoyable. It remains one of the most well-balanced, asymmetric, multiplayer first-person shooter experiences in gaming, and is pretty much the only game in a modern military setting that includes all the weird gadgets and commonly used combat vehicles and yet is easy enough to pick up. I know Battlefield 3 still exists, and I did try to play it for a bit, but the game doesn't have UI scaling and I'm too much of a snob to turn down the resolution. Battlefield 4 has 50 gadgets, 87 vehicles, 34 weapons, 70 attachments, and 4 classes. The vehicles are customizable in terms of loadout, and there's more camouflage options for your soldier vehicles and weapons than I care to count. The most difficult task in Battlefield is getting bored, is what I would say if not for the game's current meta. See, wanting to fly a jet is one thing. Becoming good at flying a jet so that you get to kill something with it or fly more than 10 seconds without getting gonked by the enemy is a whole other question. With so many options for weapons and equipment, a meta gets established. There's a clear top tier of weapons for each class, where only a couple out of each weapon category have been judged to be the most useful. Due to environmental, playstyle, and mode variety, there's not always a clear best choice of weapon for every situation, but there's more duds than there are spuds, meaning that the usable subset of weapons in Battlefield 4 is larger than most games' entire weapon catalogs. That said, the AEK still reigns supreme, though it does feel like people have gotten bored of it. Like, I remember joining servers and going against at least a dozen AEK users. It was awful. These days it's usually down to just one pathetic individual at dog tag bragging about their 30,000 AEK kills or something. The main reason why I'm hesitant to recommend this game to any newcomers is that the meta has evolved into an abomination since DICE stopped actively rebalancing the game, especially when it comes to vehicles. People point out how good some players have become at jet warfare, and that is true. There is a 27-page PDF instructing players on how to optimally fly a jet in Battlefield 4 so that you don't just get gonked immediately in every single dogfight. These days, it is nigh on impossible for a newcomer to pick up jet piloting, which I know because I just started trying to become somewhat decent at flying jets after studying the aforementioned PDF. Another big change in the meta is how one gets killed while driving a chopper. I love driving choppers, and these days about 90% of my deaths while in the pilot seat are from unconventional means like unguided ordnance such as RPGs or tank shells, partly guided like tow missiles and fully guided like TV missiles, UCAVs, and SUAVs. The remaining 10% is from actual intended anti-air such as mobile AA or other air vehicles. I don't remember the last time I got killed by a lock-on missile. The meta has shifted to favor unguided ordnance so much that I have literally been flamed in the chat by toxic players in my own team for having heat seekers equipped on any of the air vehicles. The current best attack helicopter build includes a tow for the pilot and a TV missile for the gunner, either of which can kill an opposing helicopter in a single shot. Countering a coordinated duo who are good at using those two weapons with another helicopter is impossible. They will hit you before you can lock on, before your gunner can kill them with their primary, and often before you even see them. The current meta for the Little Bird includes only the anti-ground vehicle lock-ons, which I think is stupid because there's about 400 meters of effective range between the maximum lock-on range of the heat seekers and the effective range of the main machine guns. It's also extremely hard for an enemy helicopter to dodge a lock-on because you're not infantry, you can just fly above the buildings they're using as cover. As a side note, if the enemy anti-air is using active radar missiles effectively, you might as well quit. I am not familiar with this trick, but active radar is effectively a lock-on missile that only activates the lock-on alert once it's too late for the pilot to react and pop their countermeasures. It's not just player skill that has seen a significant upgrade. The meta changed because hardware changed. In 2013, most mice had awful sensors with built-in acceleration and the vast majority of monitors were 60Hz. Tracking targets is now easier than ever, which has affected everything from infantry battles to dogfights. I can almost fully attribute my pretty high skill level as a sniper to my high refreshing monitor and the sensor in my mouse. Changes in skill and gaming hardware has completely changed how people counter helicopters. For the first couple years that the game was out, getting a kill on a heli with unguided ordnance was the stuff of legends, a once-in-a-lifetime achievement. But as the community got better overall, people realized that it wasn't actually that hard to ping an attack helicopter with a tank shell or likewise with an RPG. Even if people couldn't hit 9 out of 10 RPG shots into helis, that 1 in 10 was so elating that switching to a lock-on missile is unthinkable for many players. The issue is that a sufficiently skilled Little Bird pilot can dodge unguided ordnance, while people refuse to switch to lock-on anti-air launchers, which would functionally restrict what even very skilled pilots can do. Even the most godlike 20,000 hour, shit bucket having, no sex, no girlfriend, no job Little Bird pilots will hightail it back to their base to get their flares back after successfully countering a lock-on attack. But because the meta has shifted away from lock-ons, those same no-lifers can run rampant in the entire map for the whole match. On top of that, there's maps that don't even have a mobile AA emplacement available from the base, so I always have to end up being the one guy with an Igla single-handedly keeping the enemy chopper from reaming everyone. The issue of extreme skill pilots has gotten so bad that servers now implement anti-farming measures that will automatically kill and then kick pilots and gunners who reach a certain kill streak. In my opinion, that's a good measure, as sometimes that's the only recourse a team has for a godlike pilot who's making the game unenjoyable for an entire team, which leads to mass desertion and painful auto rebalancing. Just a few nights ago I had to switch out from an attack helicopter to a farming warring, and then I got rebalanced into the losing team. However, farming limits don't always take vehicle destruction into account, so a jet pilot whose entire purpose is to counter vehicles will never get caught by an anti-farming system. If I join a match wanting to fly helicopters for the whole game and I'm getting pounded by stealth jets, anti-farming systems are unlikely to do anything about it. I honestly commend DICE for even taking up the challenge of balancing an asymmetric game. Around the time that Evolve was released, there was a lot of hubbub about asymmetric gameplay, but Battlefield has been doing asymmetric gameplay since forever, really. Not only that, but their flavor of asymmetry exists across multiple dimensions. The maps are asymmetric, the vehicles are asymmetric, and there's asymmetric game modes like Rush. In a one-on-one battle between two competent players, one of them driving a tank and the other one piloting an attack jet, the latter one will nearly always come out on top. This isn't really dependent on range or environment, and it doesn't take any skill or effort to get access to the vehicles, they are just unmatched. How balance in Battlefield works is this: there should be a straightforward counter to everything, and no one vehicle should be effective against all other vehicles. A Little Bird can do significant damage against jets and infantry, but it has to choose between doing damage to ground vehicles and being more effective against other air vehicles. A tank can be effective against infantry and other ground vehicles, but it is vulnerable to anything that flies, and so on and so forth. This works because the vehicles are available to both teams, and the little vulnerable fleshy infantry have a considerable amount of cover to hide behind. Some of the time. One of my biggest gripes with Battlefield 4's balance is maps that offer balance shifting vehicles as reward for capturing objectives in Conquest Large, so mainly Parasol Storm and Heenan Resort. Both of these maps offer the anti-air vehicle as a reward for capturing the B and C points respectively. Because Parasol Storm doesn't have much cover for air vehicles and the central constellation of islands is small, you can use the anti-air to keep them off most of the map's objectives. Because Heenan Resort has ground bases, the first team to get given the anti-air can drive it to their base and keep it for as long as the anti-air is alive. To make it even worse, both of these maps have the full assortment of jets, making owning the anti-air extremely crucial. detail. But it isn't just the vehicles, it's the maps themselves that are asymmetric. Unless the game designers draw a line between the bases and mirror everything on either side of that line, you're going to end up with an asymmetric map. In Inhana Resort, Conquest large objectives A and B are fully destructible, which makes it very hard for enemy infantry to attack and take cover while they deal with vehicles, whereas the opposite objectives at D and E are completely indestructible, not to mention the whole nightmare area on the east side of the map. In Siege of Shanghai, one of the most devastating tactics is to get a spawn beacon on the tallest skyscraper next to E. With a limited selection of air vehicles and no AA, the team on the west side can easily grab a transport helicopter, fly on top of the tower without the enemy noticing, and just camp there the whole game, with people dropping down to capture the point as needed. One of the more common suggestions when the topic of balance comes up is to make Battlefield more realistic. Those suggestions are pure wank and would only result in a less enjoyable game. Realism wouldn't solve any of the balance issues within the game, and engagements would slow down to a crawl as people would constantly hide from engagements due to weapons essentially being hit scanned at ranges shorter than 200 meters, but with way worse accuracy, especially during movement. Realistic shooters already exist, and they are niche for a reason. Balance is not an equation that can be solved by traditional algebraic means. A multiplayer video game is a multivariate problem that can only be optimized through a community's collective intelligence and tens of thousands of hours of actual cumulative gameplay. As such, there is no one-time solution to imbalance, there is only active rebalancing. When a game studio stops rebalancing a game, the meta can only trend towards one direction, meaning one subset of weapons, vehicles, and tactics. I realize now, after spending so much time in a game that hasn't seen a rebalance in half a decade, that balancing has to be active and respond to real-time data in the current biggest meta. That said, DICE did make some baffling choices that are still present in the game. The J-Dam bomb does the damage of a mini grenade at best against infantry, but it is a bunker buster bomb. Owing to the current skill level of dedicated jet pilots, it's essentially used as a shotgun at the end of a gun run against the ground vehicles. The J-Dam's power could be made more proportional to its size by keeping the slow travel time and adding splash damage to the jet itself, which would prevent its current usage as part of a one-run kill on tanks. The Assault, aka Medic class, gets both the most powerful gun class in the game exclusively, as well as grenade launchers and the ability to heal themselves. PTWs are neat in team deathmatch situations given the size of those maps, but most engineered gadgets are useless with no vehicles around, so an entire class of weapons goes severely underused. Unfortunately for the shareholders of EA, Battlefield 4 has enough content to keep me entertained for a lifetime. However, I will once again be dumping the game for a while, not because of anything the game did wrong, but because of a critical, unmitigated flaw that exists within every multiplayer game: other people. In all honesty, I can tolerate incompetence from other players just fine, but I can't abide by idiocy. If I'm repping a little bird and the pilot messes up and hits a tree in the forest of Zavad, or a thin little antenna in Dawnbreaker, or even clips the side of a skyscraper in Siege of Shanghai, it does not affect me. After all, this is a video game, and everyone should have a chance at using all the equipment in a real match, even if they suck at the game. Speaking of repping a little bird, that mechanic is straight up awful gameplay design. It's like playing Mercy in Overwatch. Everyone else is having fun while it feels like you're barely playing the game. I cannot stand idiots. The most abominable kind of Battlefield idiot, bar none, is a vehicle waster. There's two types of vehicles in Battlefield. Ones where the driver also has direct access to the vehicle's main weapon, and ones that don't. Using the latter vehicle as transportation is a-okay. Because it is a valid combat tactic and those vehicles are hard to come by, dumping the former after getting to where you need to be is monumentally stupid. Not only is that player denying a form of enjoyment from their own teammates, but they're risking having a powerful vehicle getting stolen by the enemy team and having it used against themselves. A slightly greater idiot is the one who blows up empty enemy vehicles for points, denying their team an opportunity to steal a vehicle. I had a moment where the stars aligned and I encountered both these idiots at the same time. At the start of a Conquest Large match on Colmud, I spawned into the attack helo gunner seat. An enemy had vehicle dumped a stealth jet to get to B and it landed with no damage on it, so I jumped out and ran towards it. My attack helo pilot teammate blew it up for points. 50 points for disabling the jet, 100 points for vehicle destruction, but we could have kept the enemy team on only one jet for most of the match whilst having 3 ourselves. Even the worst cases of idiocy I've seen don't come close to actual malice from teammates, also known as griefing. Look, Battlefield is full of people essentially doing nothing but going for clips. Those people are fine with me as long as they're not vehicle wasting. They aren't interfering with their teammates or by and large trying to enjoy themselves by playing the game as it was intended to be played. There do, however, exist many party poopers, and I have 2 specific examples of celebration diarrhea that I want to go over. First was the AA humping incident. I'm in Dawnbreaker trying to fly helos, getting absolutely reamed by enemy jets. They're flying right into our base and killing me in a single run, so I switch to the anti-air. Less than a minute later, some random teammate shows up with a jeep and tries to fornicate with my AA. This twerp is ramming me repeatedly for 2 minutes straight and flaming me in the chat for reporting him to the server admin. He apparently took issue with me having a low kill count and taking the AA. I took the AA because I was getting reamed in the first place, and a good AA player isn't going to get that many kills unless they use it to push infantry, which is a death wish and an idiotic misuse of the vehicle. The second incident has to be prefaced. Vehicles are first come, first serve. Anything else is being a whining idiot about it. You can ask someone to make space for your friend, but it's just a request. A seat on a vehicle in Battlefield is not a handicap seat on a bus. If you request that someone exits the vehicle and they refuse, you move on and keep playing. You do not spam the get out command, and you do not team kill an occupant. Now you might ask, how do you team kill an occupant within the same vehicle? Let me answer your question with a question. How do you team kill outside of hardcore mode? Well, you see, the attack helo gunner is lower and more forward than the driver of the helicopter. If you can lower the helicopter into something that does damage just enough that it only affects the gunner, you can effectively team kill them. And that is exactly what happened to me. I tried to get a pilot seat, but the game made me a gunner. The pilot asks me to leave, I refuse, so he immediately went over to a burning car and team killed me. Because I know how this site works. I know that some asshat is going to jump into the comments and try to make fun of me for getting mad at or generally being emotionally affected by a game. Here's the thing. I do not enter an alternate plane of existence or an altered state of consciousness when I play a video game. The events within the game only exist within the game world, but they affect my emotional state in real life because my consciousness is the link between the game and real life. If my emotions weren't affected in this manner, then I also wouldn't be able to experience happiness from playing a game, so I might as well not play games at all. If someone is being toxic towards me in a game, that makes me feel bad. That is what actual emotional maturity looks like, as opposed to sequestering your emotions because of the lack of physical danger in gaming. If you disagree with that, you need to go build a life outside of the internet. Likewise, the things that are being said in chat matter, otherwise I'd be allowed to be an asshole in my job Slack instance. People don't behave like that in real life, partly because of the thin veil of anonymity, but largely because they get rejected from the other participants of the activity, and their disrepute spreads beyond the group's confines. If I'm behaving like an ass at a run club, it will only take a couple incidents before my reputation is in the shitter and I can't show my face outside. In Battlefield 4, there is no propagation of reputation, at least when it comes to toxicity. There are anti-cheat tools that propagate this information, but server admins can only ban a player from their own server for toxic behavior. There does not exist a mechanism to inform DICE that someone's dropping N-words in chat. Private servers exist in these isolated islands of moderation, and their reputation can't stick no matter how vulgar or toxic a player is being. Your only real recourse is if they happen to have an offensive emblem or username, and then you're reliant on social media platform moderation. Not only does the game need active moderators, it needs report escalation for in-game behavior, so consequences for bad behavior aren't sequestered to just one server. Obviously, multiplayer toxicity isn't exclusive to Battlefield, and it's the reason why I keep dumping these multiplayer games eventually. I get bored of the scripted nature of single-player experiences, so I pick up a multiplayer game for the excitement and infinite possibilities, but then I get sick and tired of being griefed and flamed, so I go back to single player for the mental tranquility. Battlefield has almost non-existent moderation tools. Force's report system should have disqualified them from getting an age rating, and I quit Counter-Strike because I got called the N-word in the same game that I pulled off a 1v5 clutch. Now the first thing I do in any multiplayer game is turn off voice chat permanently, and I turn off text chat when it's toxic, but I have no recourse for when other players exploit game mechanics maliciously to try and make my life miserable. Never mind the imbeciles spamming get out in my ear like it's going to get their virginity back from their uncle. And yet I haven't fully stopped playing Battlefield 4, even though at this point I am thoroughly sick of the player base. There just isn't another game like Battlefield 4. Yes, the gunplay in Battlefield 3 is tighter, but the vehicle gameplay isn't, and the game sorely needs a UI scaling mod or update. Arma 3 is slow as hell and requires a degree to fly the vehicles. There's a slew of hyper-realistic shooters that take themselves too seriously for my taste. Battlefield 4 is in this curious state where the game itself has held up, but the meta hasn't due to the lack of active rebalancing. The graphics are one of the many examples that disprove the theory of realistic AAA graphics aging badly, though I would give my left nut for a dimmer sun and no lens flares. The community has developed systems to ban hackers from almost every servers, and though I keep hearing claims about their proliferation, I haven't come across any during my 100 or so hours of online play over the last few weeks. I don't know what's up with that. I suspect people don't understand just how good players have gotten with modern gaming gear and almost 12 years of practice. The game equipment has been so thoroughly investigated, and people have been practicing so much with high-risk, high-reward weapons that any newcomer to the game will find nothing but misery. Though what's more unrealistic than an unforeseen, unfair death in war? Do I recommend Battlefield 4 in 2024? Maybe. For the dozen or so people around the world who are into Battlefield but somehow haven't gone around to playing its best installment? Sure. Just get it on a discount. EA runs steep discounts once every couple months on every Battlefield game on Steam, so you can get all the Battlefield games from 3 to the latest one for about €40 total.